Of you who have already joined, we'll start in 1 minute. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna get started. Thank you all for taking some time to be with us tonight. Welcome. I am so happy to be welcoming all of you to our webinar panel about careers in advocacy, policy, and government. I am particularly excited for this event because we are being joined by 4 amazing advocates who will share their experience with you all in just a few moments. But before I introduce them, I do want to talk a little bit about why you're here, what is FCNL, what is the Young Fellows Program. So my name is Larissa. I work at the Friends Committee on National Legislation as the Young Adult Advocacy Coordinator. At FCNL, we are a Quaker nonprofit lobbying organization that focuses on issues of peace and justice. And my job is to support, mobilize, and empower young adults around the country to take action on the issues that they care about. Part of that work is to share information about our awesome paid young adult programs, such as the Young Fellows Program. This is an 11-month fellowship that you can complete after you have graduated, in which you are placed on staff as a program assistant to work with either a policy team or the grassroots team. Benefits of this program in the workplace sense include salary, healthcare, and paid vacation and sick leave. But you are also joining a program that's meant to help you develop skills for your next step. Applications close February 15th. So hopefully after this panel, you will all be excited and inspired to apply for this program. And if you are not, hopefully you will still feel like you are more confident in figuring out your next steps. So who exactly is joining us tonight? They are 4 alumni of the Young Fellow Program. I will not be one of the panelists I am moderating, but I actually also am an alum of the Young Fellows Program. So first, we are being joined by Viera. She is the Advocacy Manager at Detention Watch Network. She supports DWN's mission for abolition through federal advocacy work and coalition building, while serving as a policy resource for the network. Prior to joining DWN, Gabby was a program assistant at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, working on their immigration and refugee policy portfolio. We are also joined by Monica Montgomery. Monica is the advocacy coordinator for the Council for a Livable World, where her work focuses on building congressional champions for nuclear arms control and non-proliferation and a reduced Pentagon budget, and on electing members of Congress who share these goals. Prior to joining the council, Monica worked as the program assistant for nuclear disarmament and Pentagon spending at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. She has also previously worked as a research and office assistant at the Kroc Institute for International Peace Studies and as an intern at the Arms Control Association and in the district office of former Senator Bob Corker. Our third panelist, Scherb. He joined Common Cause in May 2013 as the Director of Legislative Affairs. In this role, he helps craft and gain support for various good governance proposals, primarily related to campaign finance reform, voting rights, redistricting reform, and ethics/lobbying reform. Aaron also coordinates advocacy activities with members of Congress and their staff by helping plan and speak at congressional briefings and press conferences. From working as a congressional staffer for 3.5 years, his knowledge and understanding of the legislative process, as well as his relationships with congressional offices, help advance Common Cause's legislative goals. Aaron was a program assistant at FCNL from 2004 to 2006. And last but certainly not least, we have our fourth panelist, Aristotle Jones. Aristotle is the communications coordinator for the Justice Policy Center at the Urban Institute. He assists with various outreach projects, coordinates logistics for meetings with policymakers and stakeholders, and works with the state of Vermont for the Prison Research and Innovation Initiative. Before joining Urban, Jones was the legislative and communications assistant at America's Public Television Stations, where he maintained the press and legislative databases and created content and maintained the legislative website. Previously, he was a program assistant for domestic policy at the Friends Committee on National Legislation, where he researched and lobbied federal public policy for criminal justice reform, campaign finance, and police militarization. We are in very good hands tonight. There's a lot of experience on this panel, and I'm really excited to get started. So we're gonna start with Aristotle. Aristotle, my question for you. So we've gone through a lot of political turbulence in the last year, and obviously in the last 4 years. I hear from my boss currently at FCNL that you started our fellowship at FCNL right as Donald Trump was beginning his term as president. How did that shape your career path and the decisions that you made moving forward?
Oh man. Well, first off, thanks for having me on the panel. I'm surrounded by a lot of giants right now. I didn't know everybody was such heavy hitters. But for me, I remember the day when President Trump was elected, and I walked into FCNL, and it was so gloomy outside, such a gloomy atmosphere and gloomy environment. But I think the election of President Trump wasn't such a spark. It was more so a reminder for me. I think back when, I guess I'm gonna show how nerdy I am. I think back when I read the Federalist Papers, particularly number 62 by James Madison, and when he writes that laws are made for the few and not the many. That was more so a spark for me because it showed that the seeds of injustice are really planted way before any of us were born. And I coupled that with the statement, James Madison also is the one who implemented the Three-Fifths Compromise in our Constitution. So things like that made me realize that it's an ongoing continuance of injustice, and it's not just one person. But I think President Trump being elected was a reminder for me to keep the human need always in my focal point of what I'm doing. So since then, I've always continued like that idea of meeting the human needs to whatever type of job I do. So that was the answer to that question.
Thanks, Aristotle. I really appreciate your focus on human need and that being something that really drives you. I feel very similarly, so I appreciate that. Gabby, my next question is for you. So Gabby and I were actually fellows in the very same cohort. And for that reason, I remember the job search that you went through to, finish your fellowship and have a job after. So what skills/experience did you gain while completing the Young Fellows program that helped you land that really awesome job that we celebrated at Detention Watch Network after you were done with the fellowship?
Yeah, we were just reminiscing about this recently, actually. But I think one of the things I can really attribute to the fellowship program was getting some real hands-on experience. I think I was unsure when I started the program as to whether, what kind of work was I going to get? Was I going to just be getting busy work? Was I just going to be, treated as an intern who was there to do like all the smaller tasks? And that's really not what the experience was. I was able to be a huge part of the programmatic work. So I was in lobby visits constantly. By the end of my fellowship, I was doing lobby visits by myself, splitting them with my boss. I was like a part of drafting every single resource we put together, a part of drafting outreach to our network. And so that really made a difference when I was in the job application process and I was looking at a job. And at the time, the job that I was applying for at Detention Watch Network actually was asking for more years of experience than I had. And I remember reading through the job description but also thinking, this is asking for more years of experience, but I have actually can confidently say that I've done all these things, and I've like spent the last year really immersed in this work. And so that allowed me to really feel comfortable both applying for the position and also talking about it in the application process, and saying, even though I may not have 4 years of experience, I have 1 year where I was actually learning this work, and I learned so much, and I was completely in the weeds on it. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I would attribute to the FCNL program and the experience that I got there.
Thank you, Gabby. All right, moving on to Erin. Erin, you are now the Director of Legislative Affairs at Common Cause, and you joined Common Cause, I think, if I did the math right, 7 years after completing your time as a fellow at FCNL. So what was your guiding principle as you took steps forward in your career? Another way to put that is what made you say yes to opportunities and what made you say no to opportunities? We're hearing a combination of values driving us, what skills we have driving us to the next job. What exactly drove you to that next step?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I guess, yes, I'm probably the oldest program assistant here. So that shows my age, how long. So I did my FCNL program assistant position back from 2004 to 2006. So I guess I'm hiding my gray hairs here, hopefully. So I think, so after I worked at FCNL, my then supervisor was very encouraging of me to, he was always brought me to lobby visits. He let me do some lobby visits by myself as well. So, similar to Gabby and others, they really throw program assistants right out of the nest, which is, I think, a very good thing. It was very substantive, hands-on experience. It's not making photocopies, it's not making coffee. It's a substantive, intellectually stimulating experience. And so I went to work in Capitol Hill for 3 different House members over the course of, I guess, about 4 years, and had a fantastic time, fantastic experiences doing that as well. But there was so much, just BS there that I really found that I liked it's so much more substantive, it's so much more liberating on the outside. I had fantastic bosses on Capitol Hill. I wouldn't have traded that for a second. But I think it's just, more and more, it's kind of become crystallized in my mind from having that experience working on Capitol Hill, at least, that it's, I like sitting on the other side of the table, the outside part, and just you have so much more influence. You can be much more effective being on the outside. You're so much more substantive. And so, worked at one other nonprofit before focusing just on campaign finance reform for about 3 years, and then worked at Common Cause now for about 7.5 years, which is crazy. I've been at a place for that long. But it's just, I think, especially just because seeing democracy issues, money and politics issues, voting rights issues, really, I think more and more it's become evident, especially after the Trump administration, that too much of our democracy has been taken over by vote suppressors and corporate special interests and ultra wealthy donors. And so until we fix our democracy, it's that much harder to fix so many other critical issues that affect millions of Americans on a day-to-day basis. So that's that was a big reason why I came to from FCNL and then moved onto Common Cause.
Thank you. I appreciate that kind of distinction between being on the outside or the inside and where you think you can maybe be the most influential. I remember there was one internship I did where I was told explicitly I was not allowed to join any protest for whatever big issue was happening at the time. And that really, really bothered me. I wanted to be able to kind of be on that outside, and I was working in government at that time. And so that's definitely something that you have to think about. Where do you want your influence to be, right? So I appreciate that. Monica, question for you, surprise, surprise. So we sometimes hear things like, it's who you know, right? When it comes to a career in policy. And that might be something that is worrying people who want to enter this type of work. But I want to lift the veil on that just a little bit. Networking can obviously sound a little daunting. I'm wondering, how have you overcome those nerves? And maybe you didn't have any nerves, but how did you overcome them? How did you handle networking, and how did that kind of shape some of what you were doing in your early career?
For sure. Thanks, Larissa. Thanks just for the opportunity to be here. Definitely think it's very valid to say that I got a lot of nerves. Even just hearing the word networking, my hands start to get clammy. I love to talk, but I hate to hear myself talk. So networking is a time that can be very anxiety inducing. And I think a lot of it just goes into the idea of what even is networking. So some of the best advice that I got was to, in a way, erase the idea and the definition of networking from your mind and really think about it as a relationship building or making friends or making mentors. And that's something that I've really valued in my time. I've only been out of the Young Fellows program for less than a year now. I'm definitely the most recent Young Fellow here on this webinar. So networking is something that's still very much a part of my daily life and my career path. And I'm sure it's a part of everyone's journey to where they are now and continued career, because when you make it about relationship building, it's a lot more integrated into what your daily interactions are. So a lot of people talk about networking in a horizontal way and a vertical way. And when they talk about that, horizontal is building your network, your relationships with those more on your level. So these could be your colleagues, your friends. I would even say your professors if you're still in school, or recent college grads, maybe someone you had a class with 2 years ago that they are now working in DC or in a field that you're interested in. And then there's vertical networking, which a lot of people talk about, which I think is more the classic idea of networking, emailing someone being like, can we get coffee? Can we talk about this? You're really important. I want to learn more. Personally, I try to avoid vertical networking like the pandemic. I don't want to be a part of that unless it's going to be something that comes authentic. So if my boss introduces me, hey, Monica, I want you to meet this person, and they say, yeah, I have time, let's meet up and talk about your career, how you got here. Maybe we graduated from the same college, we have a connection. Then those meetings typically come up in an authentic way, but they're not something I seek out on my own because I don't find them as useful. Rather, the horizontal networking that we're talking about is really what I think has proven most useful in helping build my career thus far and help me in getting my current job. I moved to a partner organization, so it wasn't really much networking that had to be done. I had met my colleagues, the overwhelming majority of them, through coalition meetings or on calls or through work happy hours, and I just connected with them on a personal basis, got to know them, let them know that I enjoyed our work, I was dedicated to our work, so that way when the opportunity came that there was a job opening or the opportunity came to really just to get to know them better, that relationship already existed on an authentic level, and I didn't have to fabricate some big question to ask them over coffee to get to know them better and prove that I was smart. So really it's just looking at what already, the people that already surround you, and taking authentic opportunities to just build your personal relationships with friends, professors, people you're in meetings with, and the Young Fellows program definitely provides ample opportunities to do so.
I had never heard you talk about this horizontal vertical networking. That's really interesting. And it makes me think of the boss that I had, who's no longer at FCNL. When I was a fellow, she took me to a networking event and I was like, networking, how do I talk to anyone here? And she said, watch and learn. And she went over to someone, kind of just stood next to them and went, I love your shoes. Boom, that was it. The whole a conversation ensued from that. It was very natural. So, that's a very kind of silly example, but I think that really rings true to me when I hear you say it's about relationship building and finding that common ground a little more naturally than the word networking seems to suggest, right? So I appreciate that. Thanks, Monica. So I have a question now for all of you, and we'll go in turn to each of you. But while I'm doing that, for those of you who are joining us and watching, this is the moment where you can start asking questions. So once we're done answering this last kind of pre written question. We absolutely want questions from people in the audience. It can be for everyone, all of the panelists. It can be for just one of them. Make sure that you indicate that when you submit the question in the chat. If you get into the chat function, make sure that when you're submitting a question, that you are sending the chat to either all panelists or all panelists and attendees, just to make sure that I actually see the question and I'm able to direct it properly. So go ahead and start asking those or start brainstorming what questions you want to ask while we're going around the virtual room and answering this question. So my question for everybody is that there are, well, it starts with a statement and then a question. There are many people tuned in because they are figuring out next steps, right? And that's kind of been the theme of some of what we're talking about. So what advice would you have given yourself when you were in this situation? You were graduating college, you were in the early stages of your career. We have established for some of us, that was a couple years ago. For some of us, that was 10, 15 years ago, maybe. But regardless of when it was, what is a piece of advice that you wish you could have given yourself, either to calm your nerves or set you on the right path? And is there someone who'd like to start? I don't want to call anyone out. Okay, Aaron, go ahead.
I'm happy to, since I'm the farthest out and I've, theoretically have the most experience. I guess 2 points. First of all, you all are probably much more diligent, much more conscientious about your networking and kind of planning. And I had no clue what I was doing my senior year of college. I'd applied. I went to a Quaker college, and so I'd heard of FCNL and applied there, and was fortunate enough to be accepted. But I was terrible at networking. I was terrible at getting my resume in order. Terrible at kind of meeting people and figuring out what kind of what my interests were. So I think I guess 2 points is 2 things to keep in mind. Number one, your first job this is not going to be your last by any means. So people don't for better or worse don't stay in the same position for 25, 30, 35 plus years anymore. So just keep that in mind as well, that your first job is not going to, odds are it's not going to be your last. So you don't have to love every aspect of it, but think of it as more as just kind of, hey, maybe I like housing policy. Maybe I like working on immigration reform. Maybe I like working in clean energy issues. Think of it more as like an opportunity to learn, to kind of be intellectually stimulated and to meet new people, especially if it's a new city. And the second thing, which actually David Culp, my then supervisor at FCNL, really challenged me to do. I was much more introverted and much more I was shy, terrible at networking, and I'm still not good at it. It doesn't come naturally to me, but I've kind of become better at it over the years. It's just when there resumption of kind of in-person events again, I was making it a point of meeting 2 people at each reception, getting 2 business cards at every event that I went to. It doesn't have to be an extensive conversation, but just 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute conversations, and then just have that goal in mind of meeting 2 new people, 2 new contacts at every event, every seminar, every discussion, every lecture you go to. And then these don't have to be your best friends, they don't have to be your close kind of mentor, but just to kind of if it's an area that you're interested in getting more exposure to, or if it's something at let's say Brookings Institute and you really like their kind of governance program there, well try to meet somebody who works in it there. So when you apply for a position a year from now, 2 years from now, you can say like, oh yeah, I met John Doe or I met Jane Doe at this reception at Brookings a year ago. And to your point a little bit ago about kind of meritocracy and whether it's just about who I think to some extent it's a meritocracy, but so many of these positions when they're posted, there are 300, 400, 500 applications for a position. It certainly was that way on the Hill. And so it's more about just when they know when they have like these 5 people who they know of, or they're kind of known quantities, it just saves them time from having to go through 400 or 500 applications. So you just want to be known, or you want to make sure that you have know somebody there, so it'll be your kind of resume at the top of that pile. So just figure it out as a kind of a keep expanding your network as best as possible and try to meet as many people as possible. And it's at least Washington DC is a very small city, so I've come across a a number of people over the years who I never thought I would meet again, but just having a positive, impression, hopefully making a positive impression on them, 5, 10 years ago, you never know when that could come back around. So treat everybody with respect. I think it's good lesson.
Thanks, Aaron. I'm gonna jump over to Aristotle. Same question. What advice would you give yourself?
Oh man, I remember the time I graduated college, I was kind of sad that I wasn't doing what I wanted to do right after undergrad. So I found myself sliding into, I don't want to use the word depression, but pre-stages of deep sadness because I was comparing myself to other people and their journey. So I guess my first rod of advice is to never compare yourself within where you are in your life compared to other people, because comparison is a thief of joy. The second point, I would just really point, what are you really doing everything you want to do for? Uh, Knowing what you want, what success means to you, because it's so difficult for everybody. Even on this panel, it's so different. So knowing what your success is, what you want to do for that is very important. And then also keeping your valve open. Like Aaron said, the first job isn't going to be your last job, especially now within the gig economy. So being open to experiencing new things and keeping your mind open are very, very powerful tools to have as a human being. So non-comparison, knowing what you're doing it for, and I forgot my last point that quickly, but doing those things, I would think, are just all important. So those three, and keeping the valve open. That's what I said. Keeping the valve open.
I don't know if that was an Aristotle original or somewhere else, but comparison is a thief of joy. That really resonated with me. I'm gonna write that down and try to remember that.
That's a good thing to remember.
Good advice. Thanks, Aristotle. All right, let's go over to Gabby. What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, and agree. Thanks both Aaron and Aristotle for what y'all shared. That definitely is resonating with me too. And I think I would talk about two different pieces. One that I think people get a lot, and one that I think maybe less so. One was to shoot your shot. Like, I think absolutely one of the things that I learned was that, like, and again, as someone who also really struggles with networking and asking for help, I think being able to put yourself out there isn't always the easiest thing, but knowing that you have like support networks to rely on. So this is like coming from what Monica was sharing about how you're just consistently, just by like virtue of existing in a school, in a workspace, just like in the world, you start, building relationships with people that are natural. And I remember when I was in the job application process, and again, really nervous about putting myself out there, I had my boss who was super encouraging and always telling me, okay, like, this person knows, this person has an in there. I will help you. And her just kind of like pulling me out of my shell really helped me then be more comfortable doing it for myself in the future. And I think that kind of like leans into this second point, that piece of advice that someone I interned with while I was in college long ago told me, and was follow the right people. And so I just want to be clear, like Aaron was saying, that like this is like you're young, and this is a time to like really explore what you like and what you don't like, and you don't have to feel like you're stuck in something. And so one of the ways to like really be able to do that, and like, new opportunities will arise. One of the ways to really be able to tell, like, am I compromising my values? Am I compromising my desires? Am I compromising what I want? Is like, if you are evaluating a place, I guess, and you see people who just feel right, who seem like the right people, who seem like they're doing the right work, that's where you want to go. You want to make sure that there's so much time to grow and to learn, and you want to make sure that you're in the right place with the right people while you're doing that. And so I guess that's a really helpful piece of advice that I got a while back that I don't think is necessarily the most common.
Thank you, Gabby. I love that. All right, Monica, what advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, so this has all been really great advice. So I'm sure that my advice is just going to build on a lot of the themes already pulled out here. But I would say, as someone who has probably most recently been in this position of graduating college, trying to figure out what I want to do and how I want to get there, something that I think I hopefully tried to follow, and definitely looking back would want to yell at myself even more, is that you don't have to have it all figured out. I definitely graduating college, there's always the question, what do you want to do? Or you're out of college, what do you want to do? Particularly like in my field, nuclear arms control, non-proliferation, it's very niche. And even though it's like a very niche topic, there's tons of even smaller silos of expertise. Like, oh, I'm a Russia expert, I'm a US expert, I care about this, I care about that. And I'm like, oh, I have to find like my perfect expertise, and I have to know now, and I have to be able to write that so beautifully in a cover letter and back it up with all these things on my resume, and that's just not feasible. So my advice that I learned from others and would give to myself then and to others now is that just follow what interests you, what passions. For me, it was, I knew I wanted to work in something to do with politics and something to do was anything that would work to make the world a better place, which is really lame to say, but that is what I was like. I don't know what I want to do, but I know that I want to do something that will benefit others. For me, somehow that ended up being, I want to get rid of nuclear weapons. It actually direct line with the Pope, but we won't get too much into that. But I was in college and went to a conference at the Vatican actually that I got through just having a chat with a professor about what I was interested in. He was like, oh, I'm organizing this delegation to go to the Vatican to a conference about nuclear weapons. I was like, I know nothing about that, but it sounds really interesting. And so I kept my horizons open, and I got really lucky with this opportunity. And therefore, I kept just building on that and building on that. As I've come into the field more, I still understand I'm not a Russia expert, I'm not an expert in this, but I know that I like to understand Congress, and I like to lobby Congress and advocate with constituents and partners. So just continuing to understand that you're not going to have it figured out senior year, you're probably not going to have it figured out 10 years from now. You're going to just keep exploring what drives you and what pulls you, and keeping your options wide and your interests broad, while finding the niche topics and the niche skills that you think you're actually really good at, and really leaning into those, but being open to those changing in the future will help, I think, open many opportunities and many doors, and take a lot of pressure off yourself.
Thanks, Monica. I think that for me, when I graduated, it was like a glass shattering moment where I realized you don't actually know how much is out there and just how many of those kind of niche interest areas there are until you're there and you're working and you're talking to people. So that was really important for me as well to realize that. All right, there are a lot of questions that are coming in. It's a good problem to have. I feel like we might not even get to all of them, but I'm gonna start with this one. I think it's directed just at anyone who might want to respond. It doesn't have a name. So the question is, how would all of you recommend a first-generation college student with little institutional knowledge, or one that comes from a background that is not widely represented in government, get their foot in the door and build a career in policy/government? And I think there was maybe a follow-up question. I don't know if it was a separate question or a follow-up. What are some resources you all would recommend to someone getting started? Who wants to take it?
I think that's a really heavy question, but I guess the first step is, I don't know, maybe knowing you have to believe in yourself first. I think Marcus Garvey says that with confidence, you won half the battle. So believing in yourself is the first thing that you can ever do, and knowing that you are rooted in trying to bear witness to some type of injustice or unrepresentation of who you are, and through the history of that, knowing that you may come as one, but you stand as 10,000. So I think knowing those two things, believing that you gotta believe in yourself, and that you're not the first person to try to do this. And if you are, though you're the blueprint, somebody will read it one day. And that's what I would say.
just to follow on that great point from Aristotle, especially on the how to find this focus and really feel, which I think is important in finding your footing and confidence, and even knowing where to look for opportunities and to be able to build your way into any specific field, is just by soaking up any information. So in college, I followed a lot of people on Twitter that were nuclear policy experts, or I read a book that was not so dry that I was bored by it and super technical, but had a good narrative behind it about negotiating the Iran deal, or learning about Catholic nuns who were disarmament activists in my hometown of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. But just doing little tiny things to build your background and your knowledge, and to help you be exposed to these ideas and the language of Washington and these institutions, is, I think, a very low pressure way to get in there. So honestly, Twitter is a really good place for that. Twitter can also be a very toxic place, and you could do a lot of scrolling at all times, but finding a certain few folks that are entertaining and informative, and you can kind of follow the debate and the conversation and read interesting articles that they share when it's there. Something that really helped me in college, and it is a very central part to DC life. So that's one piece of advice I have.
Gabby, did you want to add something, or maybe I missed the mute unmute? Not to put
Yeah. No, I just wanted to a little bit build on what Aristotle shared. This is a really difficult question, and because it's a really difficult thing to do, to be honest. Like, I remember definitely being in government spaces, particularly in like offices with members of Congress, and meeting with people and feeling like I wasn't being taken seriously because of just who I am. And so what I would say, one, is definitely the piece that Aristotle said about believing in yourself. Don't let yourself be intimidated, like take up all the space. And I know that's easier said than done. But that's definitely something that you have to, like, a muscle that you have to like build and work up. I still struggle with it a lot, to be honest with you. But it's definitely gotten better as the time has passed, kind of. And the other thing I will say is also, like, again, try to surround yourself. And this is, again, what I said, try to surround yourself with the right people. Like, at the end of the day, you want to be surrounded by like coworkers that will support you, one. And then also just, you know, in terms of the ways you can get a foot in the door, there's just like a lot of like really random, like little like programs that Congress and the government just run, specifically for either like first generation, low income, certain racial minorities, like, and you know, those programs have their like issues to begin with, on like bottom line, but then you're also meeting other, like, it's the way to get, like, start building relationships. You're also meeting other people who are trying to, you know, break into that work as well, and might have similar backgrounds as you. And like Aristotle said, it's like there are folks laying the blueprint down, and it's just like finding them as much as you can, and really like trying to build that together, is what I would say.
Thank you. Hey,
I would just that I'm sorry, very sorry.
No,
sorry,
go
sorry.
ahead, Aristotle. Please.
I think to just to final this off, there are 10 college eligible men in my family. I'm the first to graduate from college. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's out of your alignment. So there's no such thing as a 0% possibility. So be it. I'm going to mute myself now.
All right, so this question is for Monica, but I honestly think anyone could jump in with thoughts about this. The question is, how can we build vertical relationships during the pandemic when we have little/no contact with colleagues? So, I mean, I was actually thinking that too. I wrote the question about networking, and I was like, oh, well, in the pandemic, it's very different. So I wonder if you have any experience or examples about that, or what you think about that. And again, it was addressed to Monica, but I really think anyone could jump in after Monica to give some more thoughts.
Thanks, Larissa. Yeah, it's a great question. I think first of all, I would just say, like, give yourself a break. I know that is especially hard to hear if you're looking to get into the field or you're facing a graduation or an end of a job, but I think that just recognizing that we're all living in a very, very tough time and that we can't operate under normal expectations that we put on ourselves or we put on each other, because we're all stuck in our home and our friends and family are get sick, and we know people that have actually died and whose lives and livelihoods have been upended by the pandemic. We can't be holding ourselves or others to the same standards. And I really believe that. I will be the first to admit that my networking levels have decreased significantly since I've been sitting in my office bedroom, kitchen, living room that you all see. Like, I have to do what I need to do to get through my work during the day and not lose my mind at night. So I think that that's not an answer, though, if you're still faced with anxiety about or stress about what to do and how to build your network. So some things that I have done when I have been working in this during these times is just to try to reinforce the relationships that I already have. So connecting with an old professor or checking in with a former or current colleague, if you do have them, just about how they're doing, or, oh, I can't wait to talk about this when we get back to our real life. Just not trying to hold yourself to standards that I have to meet 2 new people every day at a networking event, because that's just not possible. There's also a plethora of online events and opportunities that weren't available to many people outside of Washington before the pandemic. And while it's certainly not a great thing and it's not equal to it, I think it's a silver lining that Zoom has allowed for this space to hopefully become more open and more welcoming of folks like across the country. So as you are now taking a horrible, at least snowy, cold evening in Washington, D.C. to log on and listen to people talk, and when appropriate, following up, like sending my information's on my website at my work, sending me an email, finding an opportunity to engage in the opportunities that minimally present themselves in these times. But as I said, first and foremost, hold yourself to standards. Don't hold yourself to standards that existed before, and really like protect your mental health, protect your family, your love, and we will get back to normal, hopefully sooner rather than later, and you can brush up those networking skills then, but we're all going through this together, and that's important.
Aaron, Aristotle, Gabby, anyone want to add?
Monica speaks for the people on that one. She did a phenomenal job. Everything she said, 100% agree with.
Okay, looks like there's a lot of agreement. Thank you, Monica. Okay, this question is for all of the panelists. What is the best memory that you have from the fellowship? And I'm gonna start with, I'll start with Monica, since you just completed the fellowship and hopefully you remember something as being the best memory that you have. And so go ahead. Thanks, Monica.
Absolutely. Wow, you're just getting to hear a lot of Monica right now. But I don't know, this might be kind of like a cheating answer because mine's more of like a category of memories, but something that I definitely appreciate in the moment, and I appreciate even more now, is looking back on it, is the one-on-one time I got with my supervisor, and just the long conversations and support and guidance. So my supervisor actually left last week to go back into a government job at the State Department, and I was talking to him and reminiscing about the long walks that we would take from the office to like 15 minutes to a house meeting, or through parks and through city streets, and we would just spend that time really talking about myself, my career, what's in the news today, prepping for the meeting, and why that's kind of like a weird memory and things to look back on. It's something that I really treasure because he's a really cool dude who has a lot of experience, and I got a lot of one-on-one time that with my supervisor that I don't think other jobs probably offer the opportunity to. As the fellow program is now, it's most often one supervisor to one fellow. So it's a lot of attention and built-in resources that you have, and it's really fond memories from joking about things that had nothing to do with our work to learning and growing a lot in my confidence and my knowledge of the field. My first day on the job, everyone was talking about going to lobby visits. He actually took me to a lobby visit on the first day. And that was something, the walk I remember to the lobby visit, I was like, why are we doing this? Like, don't take me into the Senate office building right now. I'm not prepared for this. Of course, he knew what he was doing. It was a friendly office. We were just catching up on some stuff. But it's something that those conversations before and after meetings really value and really cherish, and I know they play a pivotal role in my career and knowledge now.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to Erin. What is your favorite memory from being a fellow?
Well, actually, I'm going to somewhat copy Monica. It wasn't just one memory, but it was, I think it was kind of goes back to the role of mentor. So I was very fortunate. So David Culp, who I worked for at the time at FCNL, was just an incredible mentor. And I was extremely green and newly coming to Washington. And he really just, he treated me not as a commodity or, not as somebody just trying to crank out materials or crank out resources to help him better himself. But he really tried to always, develop me and make sure that, no matter what it was we were working on, it was always, he would give me credit. He would let me write, whether it's op-eds in my name or he'd let me set up the lobby visit. It wasn't all about him. And I think that's really rare. That's hard to find in Washington, D.C. And I think that's probably something fairly unique to FCNL and really an attribute of FCNL. And so, it's that kind of mentorship. And when the kind of the program fellowship was ending, he would, towards the last 4 or 5 months, like he would really try to make sure that, I would take at least 2 days a week or 2 afternoons a week and go meet with Hill staff. Like he'd put me in touch with his contacts and help set up coffees. And so I think that's just that selflessness was just really something that I appreciated and has helped me every time somebody has reached out for an informational interview afterwards. I always accept those. I always try to help people as well, try to pay it forward because of how helpful he was with my, career and my kind of personal development as well. So I think, similar to Monica, it was that kind of that mentorship and that kind of instilling of advice and wisdom, and just complete, just not wanting to claim credit for oneself, but making sure that the program assistants were the ones who could kind of get the credit as well.
Thank you. Aristotle, what was or part of the fellowship?
Yeah, I didn't have David Culp as my supervisor, but phenomenal person, human being, with great music taste, and he liked cookies like me, so we got along very well. But my own very supervisor, Jose Walsh, was very important to me. We lobbied together. I still talk to Jose to this day. We hang out and we're colleagues, we're friends. So I really appreciate that. The cohort, that's a really, really good memory for me. We shared a lot of laughs and just very, very intimate, mundane moments that I keep with me in my heart forever. So my David Culp, my supervisor Jose Walsh, and my cohort, all amazing, just beautiful people.
I will say that when I let staff know who the 4 panelists are going to be, Jose responded in the chat with Aristotle in all caps and like a million exclamation marks. So
I love him.
I love to see that relationship, or I love to hear that relationship continued after your fellowship. All right, Gabby, what was your favorite part?
I guess I'll talk about the quorum. I was also going to echo, my supervisor is a huge mentor, and we also have a really colleague relationship now. We're friends, and it's really great. But I'll say that for the cohort, I think it's a really special experience, being part of a lot of people who are your age trying to find their way in a career or field. And I'll say, I don't know, personally, I had a really great, my Larissa is actually my best friend. we did the fellowship together. She is my best friend. And my partner, I also did the fellowship the same year that I did. And so clearly I got very close with my cohort. But I just remember at the beginning of our program, they were just constructing our second office. And so we were put into our temporary placement in the conference room, where it was like the entire cohort just like had our desks down there. And it was just, again, completely different to be able to, have all those, you're new and you're trying to figure stuff out, and have all those things that feel like stupid questions that you don't want to ask, just like people who have been working at an organization for a really long time, or who have been working in general for a really long time, to be able to just rely on all these people who are figuring it out at the same time, and like not have, and especially if you're moving to a new city like I was, not have, having that to combat the like loneliness of just, trying to live your life on your own for the first time after college, I think is a really significant thing.
Thanks, everyone. So we are about to reach time. I think we're gonna have time for maybe one more question. I'm trying to pick a good one. There are so many, and I want this to be an opportunity for all of you to answer one final question. I'm getting a couple different questions about applications and how you can stand out, related to, there's a question about what major should you be in college? Is there something that you absolutely need to do in order to stand out? So that's kind of the theme of some of the last questions coming in. And I'll kind of put that all together in this one question. So it says, I discovered my passion for public policy later in my college career and don't have much on my resume regarding public policy. How do I write an effective cover letter for things like the Young Fellows Program and other similar programs to reflect the passion my resume doesn't show? So like I said, there's a couple people asking questions about that. So what advice would you give for people who are trying to take that first step? Maybe they didn't major in anything related to politics in college. Is that going to affect them? How would you tell them to kind of show that they're passionate and they're ready to take this on if they haven't had the experience yet? Not everybody at once. Okay, go ahead, Aaron. Yay, thank you.
I think, yeah, that's a great, I know that comes up a lot, or I talk to, doing informational interviews with folks. It's like, oh yeah, it's hard to break into this field without any substantive experience. And I guess, one thing I always try to encourage people to do is just, there's always, volunteer opportunities. And it doesn't have to be full-time. It doesn't, it certainly doesn't have to be 30 or 40 hours a week. But if you're able to, most places, when things are back to semi-normal, you can volunteer, 5, 7, 10 hours a week at an organization. And that's a way to demonstrate, not only your commitment to the issue, but then the commitment to that organization or the organization's goals. In a couple cases I've found where people have actually gotten jobs, it's turned into a job that way, where they've just, kind of been in the right place, right time, and been able to get a job, parlay that into a job. But other times, just having that, being able to put that volunteer experience on your resume, I think is really important. Always trying to keep in mind, okay, how can I kind of capture this in one bullet point, I'm not supposed to say bullet point, one dot point on your resume, to quickly synthesize your whatever project or whatever experience you had from that volunteer experience. Like, how can you synthesize that? So always try to be keeping in mind for that volunteer experience, how that could translate into a quick sentence on your resume. So I think volunteering can be a really good point, a really good way to break into an organization or a field that you haven't already had experience in. And again, it doesn't have to be full time, but just one day a week, or even in the evening for a couple hours, especially with everybody being remote. Many organizations are happy to have somebody who can do, whether it's doing calls or working on one specific project for a couple hours in the evening. Just I think that can go a long way.
I'll jump in next here. As during my time as a young fellow, I spent actually a week going back to my college and recruiting. So this was a conversation that came up a lot in students' questions. So how do I make my cover letter or resume stand out, especially if I haven't done work in this area or I haven't held an internship in this? And if it's still the same, one thing that I shared then was that I really enjoy the FCNL Young Fellows program application, because at least when I applied, there was a question that was like, list anything and everything that you've done related to these categories. And the list was like super long: volunteering, political advocacy, student government. Like it just listed a ton of things that really just was giving us space to talk about anything that you felt would be connected. And I promise you that if you reflect on your time in college or your experiences, there's going to be something there that you can talk about that demonstrates why you will be a passionate, dedicated young fellow in the program. So just really not limiting yourself to some certain box that like, oh, I didn't intern in this hypocritical say for my member of Congress, which I did do, but there's other things that I promise you can find, as Aaron talked about, in volunteering. Maybe it's a paper that you wrote in a class. Oh, I was really able to explore this topic. Or it's a club that you went and attended the Women's March with and learned about the power of taking to the streets. Or it's a documentary that you watched that really inspired you and the values that you take from it. Not limiting yourself to like what you would view as conventional boxes to tick on a resume, and using free response answers and an application, your cover letter, to let those things come out are really important. And relatedly, talking about the values and the mission of the organization that you're applying to, because everyone can, possibly not everyone can have the opportunities, but many people can have experiences that can make them a good candidate. But what they're really looking for is someone who's going to fit in and care about the work that we're doing, and particularly at an organization like FCNL that's so mission driven and so values driven. And a piece of advice that I was given and I always give to others is really talk about what it is that draws you to FCNL and the work that they're doing, and the desire to build a more peace and just world. And that's what's going to make you stand out and make you want to be in that position as well. So finding unique ways to share those similar interests and passions in free response and cover letter, and not feeling the pressure to have the perfect resume is my advice there.
Yeah, I will go really quick because Monica said everything exactly what I was thinking. Just really like demonstrating your passion and telling your story. Like it's really, like she said, if you look back, you can see the like seedlings of that interest. Like how did that develop, and tell that story. Like I think it's like it's very fine to be transparent and say that, you know, I was in a certain place and thought I had this interest, but then these things brought me to this new passion that I have, and I would really love to pursue it. And I think that, like, this is an example not related to myself, but a really good friend of mine who studied economics in school and then graduated and got a job and decided she hated it, and all of a sudden like was volunteering at a hospital on the side and decided she wanted to go to vet school. And just took up a bunch of different volunteer positions, started applying to different kinds of programs, and just told her story of like, this is what I did, but all these experiences that I had developed this new passion in me that I would now want to dedicate myself to. And so yeah, just be really explicit about that. And then like Monica said, like talk about the organization. Like they want to see whatever they have in their job description, they want to see that echoed in your application at any point that you can do that. So yeah, definitely.
I think everybody said the perfect thing. I think the Buddhists have a saying to turn poison into medicine, which is basically turning a negative into a positive. So if the poison and the negativity is that you didn't major in a certain major, you don't work in this field, well, you can pivot, you can turn it into a medicine, the positivity. Well, it's like everyone's saying, you volunteered, you worked on this paper, you watched a documentary. It's just knowing, and possibly even if you didn't major in it, every field needs new ideas. So again, turning a negative into a positive, your new experiences, your own experiences are necessary, just like everybody else's. And so just keeping that in mind is what keeping the goal in mind is good too. So everybody, great thoughts.
Thank you. Aristotle, I've so appreciated every response you've given has somehow included some poetry. Wow. Thank you so much, Aaron, Aristotle, Monica, Gabby, Hannah, who is not here but was running tech the whole time. Thanks for being here and giving us your expertise, your experience, and your time. And thank you to everyone who has joined and asked some awesome questions. I am sorry we couldn't get to all of the questions, but a follow-up email will be sent out and you will get this information. You'll get my information. You'll be able to reach out and ask any questions that I unfortunately was not able to ask of the panelists. The two things I will say before we wrap up is that this application for the Young Fellows Program closes in exactly 2 weeks. So February 15th is the last day that we're accepting applications. And so if you're interested in applying, you still have 2 weeks to do that. And I hope that you will take a look and put some time into that and join this awesome alumni cohort and FCNL community. So if you want more information about that, some links will be up on the screen in just a second, but verbally that's fcnl.org/youngadult. And then to Erin's point about getting to know an organization and kind of getting your foot in the door, we do have a Young Adult Advocacy Conference, March 20th to the 22nd. That's Spring Lobby Weekend. And this is not something you have to pay for or apply for. You can just register and join. You will learn how to lobby. We will train you on how to lobby. You'll get networking opportunities, and we'll be working to lobby on legislation that addresses police violence and the militarization of the police. So if you're interested in passionate about those issues, join us. If you want to learn a little bit more about FCNL, join us. If you want to attend a lobby training with 400 to 500 other people online, please join us. And that link is fcnl.org/SLW. Those links will be on the screen in just a moment, but you'll receive all of this information, including a recording of the webinar in an email, I think tomorrow. Thank you all so much for joining, and have a really great rest of your night.